Good morning, Facebook friends and my Sunday school class at the All Nation Pentecostal Church. I also want to say good morning to some of my Chase family. They have been encouraging me and listening to the Sunday school lesson. And so welcome to you too. This morning we start a new quarter. It is the summer quarter. It will be focusing on kings and leaders. This morning our writer chose for a subject, Ehud defeats Moab. Moab is a country of people. Ehud is an Israelite. The writer of the lesson extracted our lesson from Judges, the 3rd chapter, the 12th through the 17th verse, the 20th through the 26th verse, and he also picked up the 30th verse. He chose for a spotlight, or our golden text, as I read. When the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer. This Ehud, the son of Gerar, a Benjamite, a left-handed man. Judges 3:15. And so our lesson today, today's aim of the lesson is to learn that sin will always lead to a broken fellowship with God and chastisement from Him. The actual principle of our lesson is to be assured that God will always forgive sin if we repent. The application is to seek the joy that comes from obedience, and to know that while He will always forgive us, it's best to obey Him in the first place. I do agree with that. And so as I was reading this lesson, the aim, I recall a movie that we watched together. When I say we, my family and I, and it's the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. And so there's a scene in that movie, it's a comedy. There's a scene in the movie where they're all in prison, and there's a prisoner that asks if Martin Lawrence wants his cornbread. And Eddie Murphy said, "Don't give him your cornbread." And he goes on to say, "If anybody touch my cornbread, there's going to be consequences and repercussions." And so from time to time, we'll use that term. There's going to be some consequences and repercussions in our family settings. And so today, I want to let you know that sin brings consequences and repercussions. Let's go to our lesson this morning. The introduction the introduction of the lesson says that God is looking for people who are willing to obey Him. There are tremendous blessings that come from being obedient to the Lord, but severe consequences results from rebelling against Him. And so I want to give you a backdrop of our lesson. We have a story. I love stories. Stories always help us to understand the message that God is sending. And in our lesson today, we have the children of Israel. And if I can just give you a brief history of them. So the children of Israel was birthed from Abraham. Abraham was the father of the nation, and he birthed Isaac. Isaac was his promised son. At 100 years old, he had Isaac. And then Isaac had Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau being twins, and the lineage or the line in the story goes through Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and so we refer to him as Israel. Israel had 12 sons, and so we refer to them as the 12 tribes. Their offspring are the 12 tribes of Israel. And as they grew, they migrated to Egypt, a land adjacent to Egypt called Goshen, and they lived there, and they were oppressed by Egypt for 400 plus years, and they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord sent a deliverer, which was Moses. And you know the story of Moses. And so Moses was instrumental as their leader to lead them from Egypt into the promised land, not into the promised land, but to the promised land. And when Moses died, then Joshua was the new leader. And Joshua was instrumental in helping the children of Israel secure all of the land that God had promised them through battle and through conquest. And so after Joshua went off the scene and passed away, then the Lord, he orchestrated judges. So there were a series of judges. And so the book of Judges gives us the story of this time frame in the life of the children of Israel. And there were several judges. There were even a female judge. And the judge would serve as, of course, the leader, and would settle cases and issues among the people, and would also serve as a military leader. And so it's important to note also during this period of time that the children of Israel lived life in a recurring cycle. What do you mean, teacher? What I mean by they would be blessed. The Lord would bless them, and he would fight for them, and they would prosper, and they would be a kingdom that other kingdoms would revere. And during this time period, they would forget about God, and they would begin to serve idol gods, and God would send them a messenger to inform them that they needed to return to him and repent, and they wouldn't. So he would send discipline, or he would give them discipline. A form of that discipline would be allowing other nations to conquer them or to oppress them. In this particular story, the king of Moab, Eglon, was the oppressor, and this was their discipline at that time. The discipline had gotten so bad that they cried out to God. Now, as the king Eglon would require of them tributes and taxes, and so long as they paid the king, they would have peace. And the payment would be their produce, whatever they grew. So much so they would have to give so much to the king, they would lack. And so when it got so bad, they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord heard their cry, and he raised up a deliverer. This deliverer was Ehud. He was a left-handed Benjamite. And when I said Benjamite, he was from the tribe of Benjamin, a small tribe. Now, in that day, being left-handed was very uncommon. So I would imagine he had a lot of ridicule. But I want to encourage you today, God can use your difference. He was different. Being left-handed was different. God can use the difference he put in you to be a blessing to others. And so don't despise the difference. Whatever you are that makes you different, celebrate that. Cultivate that. God can use that. He specifically made you different on purpose. We all have something that we can contribute. We all have something that makes us different. Not different to be despised, but different to add value. And so this left-handed Benjamite was used to bring down the king. And so we go on with the story. At this particular time, Ehud was elected to be a part of the assembly that would take the tribute to the king. And so they gathered up all of their produce, and they went to the king to deliver it. And once they delivered it, they were leaving. But Ehud stayed back and told the king, I have a secret message for you. The king was intrigued, and the king excused his servants and his bodyguards just so he could hear what this secret was. So he invited Ehud into his parlor. And when they got into the parlor, it's important to note that the king was extremely, extremely, extremely fat. And when they got into the parlor, the king leaned in to hear what the secret was. Well, Ehud had an 18-inch blade, double-edged sword strapped to his his right thigh. And because it was hidden under his clothes, and no one, when they inspected him, no one knew to look for it on the right thigh, because typically you wore your sword on your left side so you can pull it out with your right hand to execute. And when the king leaned in, Ehud went under his cloak and took out the double-edged sword and stabbed the king into his belly. And the actual sword went all the way, it went in his belly, and his fat enveloped both the blade and the handle, so much so that the king could not get it out of his belly because the fat had enveloped it. The king fell dead. Ehud remained silent until the king fell, and he left the parlor, locked the doors behind him, and exited the palace. In the meantime, the servants, when they came to check on the king, found the doors locked. They just assumed that he was using the restroom, and so they gave him his privacy. That assumption allowed Ehud to safely leave the palace and the grounds. Eventually, when they got nervous and sort of embarrassed about waiting so long, they went and got the keys and opened up the doors, and they noticed, and they found their king dead. When Ehud left the palace, he went straight to the tribe of Ephraim, which was the largest tribe, to plot the battle, because he knew the Moabites were coming. And when they came, they went into battle, and the Lord gave them victory. They were able to kill about 10,000 soldiers. And after the battle, the Israelites had peace for 80 years. That was the longest time of peace in the book of Judges that the Israelites had. That's our story. Our story for today. The message is we should obey God. If we don't obey God and sin, there are consequences and repercussions. And when God sends his discipline, he doesn't send discipline to kill you or to harm you or to hurt you. He sends discipline so that you will repent and return to him. That is our lesson for today. I just want to remind you, if you're different, celebrate your difference. Until next week, God bless you. I love you.